After 18 years, we're eliminating your position, my boss said flatly. Please clear out your desk by the end of the day. My name is Lena Moore, 51 years old, and until that Monday morning, I was senior systems analyst at Straightest Point Technologies in Charlotte, North Carolina. For nearly 2 decades, I was the invisible backbone of the IT department. From clunky desktops and dial-up to seamless cloud migration and cybersecurity audits. I had weathered 3 CEOs, 4 rebrands, and countless sleepless nights. And yet, I stayed. I trained every fresh-faced hire, rescued every corrupted file, and worked through birthdays and anniversaries, never asking for recognition or even a raise. I thought loyalty still mattered. So when Eric, the current VP of Operations, called me into his office with Natalie from HR already seated, I knew. I could feel it in the stale silence of the room. The air had shifted weeks ago. Conversations went quiet when I walked by, system access began quietly changing, and meetings no longer included me. I understand, I said softly, nodding once. I walked out without another word. No yelling, no pleading, just quiet acknowledgement. Back at my desk, the younger analysts I had trained glanced my way, then quickly turned back to their screens. Word travels fast. They were good kids, but none of them truly understood the systems underneath. The old architecture, the legacy code I built, or the security layers buried deep in every server. I began packing methodically. Family photo. A chipped coffee mug my daughter made in middle school. A small ivy plant that somehow thrived under cold fluorescent lights for 18 years. Tracy from marketing stopped by, her expression tight with concern. Lena, I just heard. This is ridiculous. You practically built this place. I gave a small shrug. Companies change direction. But like this? No warning, no thank you? After everything you've done. It's fine, I said gently. It wasn't fine. But I wasn't about to give them the drama they were hoping for. As I turned to leave, Eric stood outside his office, watching. No handshake. No goodbye. Just surveillance. They thought I would walk out quietly. And I did. But they had no idea what I'd already built and what I still had access to. In the parking lot, I sat quietly in my car, staring up at the glass-paneled building where I had spent nearly half my life. That company badge I just handed over? It had been renewed 18 times. They thought they were getting rid of a redundant analyst. What they didn't realize was over the years, I had become the most vital person in that building. Not because I was flashy or exceptional, but because I was methodical, thorough, invisible in plain sight. They never noticed that I'd quietly built out secure audit protocols after a financial scandal 5 years ago, or that I'd archived system logs and change histories on encrypted backups, or that the legal team had once asked me to create a system to detect insider threats, and I had kept a copy, per policy, just in case. They forgot all of that, because I never made noise. As I pulled out of the lot, I passed the building's back entrance. The loading dock area where we used to sneak out for lunch breaks back in the early days, when Straightest Point was just 2 floors in a leased office park. I'd started there when my daughter Emily was in kindergarten. She was now finishing a PhD in molecular biology. Back then, we had folding chairs in the break room. Now there was a sleek wellness pod with a juice bar and nap zones. I had helped build that transformation digitally and structurally. Turned down offers from Google and Deloitte, thinking loyalty meant something. My husband Marcus used to joke that the servers were my second family. He wasn't wrong. I knew every failover pathway, every undocumented script, every backdoor fix that kept the company online when no one else could figure out what went wrong. That's why their mistake wasn't just cruel, it was foolish. Because while Eric was busy with his PowerPoints and Natalie smiled her rehearsed HR smile, I was watching. And quietly noticing things no one else saw. And over the past few months, I had started seeing patterns. Strange ones. Tomorrow was Wednesday, board meeting day, and they had no idea what I'd prepared for them. Eric became my boss 5 years ago. A fresh-faced MBA with big ideas and no interest in history, especially not the digital kind buried under 2 decades of updates, patches, and improvisations. He didn't see people. He saw resources. We clashed early on, though I kept it professional. I tried to explain the complexity of our systems. The handwritten scripts holding outdated databases together, the forgotten servers no one dared to touch, the security layers built not from manuals, but from lived experience. He listened, but only long enough to nod and move on. "We need to future-proof," he'd say in meetings, quoting white papers instead of staff insights. "Trim inefficiencies. Embrace digital transformation." 6 months ago, Eric brought in a consultant named Jordan Wells. Polished. Confident. The kind of guy who wears expensive glasses without prescription lenses. His LinkedIn screamed Stanford. His handshake was firm and forgettable. He was brought in, allegedly, to help modernize our systems. I wasn't fooled. They started having quiet meetings behind closed doors, ones I used to be invited to. Conversations would pause when I walked in. Then I began noticing little things. My admin permissions were subtly adjusted. One tool after another, just enough to slow me down. Just enough to frustrate me. I didn't complain. I just watched. "Everything okay at work?" Marcus asked one night as we sat out on the porch, sipping tea. I smiled thinly. Just a few changes. But it felt different this time. I was being edged out. Reassigned. Cut out of emails. Younger team members were given projects I once led. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, I found it. Buried in a shared drive, a memo. Company-wide modernization plans. Departmental restructuring. New leadership under Jordan Wells. My name? Not listed anywhere. And that wasn't the worst of it. Running a routine security scan, a task no one else bothered with, I noticed irregularities in the financial software. Monthly transfers to a vendor I didn't recognize, Clearwater Solutions LLC. Small at first, then gradually increasing. Curious, I looked up the vendor. Registered just last year. Listed business address? A rented mailbox at a UPS store in Wilmington. I didn't say a word. I just copied everything. And kept watching. Because sometimes, the quietest person in the room sees the most. The morning after I was let go, I didn't set an alarm. No commute. No meetings. Just silence and the steady hum of my old personal laptop in the corner of my home office. The air smelled like fresh coffee, courtesy of Marcus, who placed the mug beside me without a word. After 22 years of marriage, he didn't need to ask. He knew. "I'm heading to the store," he said softly. "Need anything?" I shook my head. When the front door closed, I slid open the bottom drawer of my desk and retrieved a small black flash drive, one of several I'd secured over the years. Company policy forbade external storage of internal data, of course. But a decade ago, when legal had asked me to design a disaster recovery system in case of insider threats, I was very clear about needing offsite backups. They signed off. And promptly forgot. I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. Within seconds, my screen lit up with folders, secure logs, archived emails, flagged transactions, and system activity reports spanning almost 5 years. I wasn't hunting. I was confirming. There it was. A full trail of financial activity linked to Clearwater Solutions LLC, just under $2 million in payments over the last 18 months. All authorized under the office of the CFO, Rebecca Lane. Each transaction tied to software licensing invoices, legit on the surface, but inflated. Sometimes by 12%, sometimes by 25%. Not enough to raise alarms, but enough to matter. Then I pulled the registration for Clearwater. Owner, Gavin Lane. Rebecca's brother-in-law. A quick search showed a man with no digital footprint, no company profile, no team. Just a fake vendor and a steady income stream, signed and approved from inside. I leaned back in my chair, my fingers still on the keyboard. It wasn't anger I felt. It was precision. Focus. The kind of sharp-edged clarity you only find in the aftermath of betrayal. For 18 years, I had been the company's shield, guarding its systems, saving its data, mentoring its people. They thought they were firing an old analyst. What they actually did was release a forensic-grade watchdog with a memory and backups. Tomorrow was Wednesday. Board day. I smiled. They had no idea what was coming. Wednesday morning, I parked across the street from Stratus Point's sleek glass headquarters. I sipped lukewarm coffee from a travel mug and watched employees stream through the revolving doors, most of them too distracted to notice the gray SUV idling at the curb. In the passenger seat beside me sat my personal laptop, open and ready. I logged into a shadow email account I had created years ago, technically for internal security testing. It mimicked the company's domain perfectly, but wasn't traceable through the internal directory. Legal had approved it back then. No one remembered it now. At exactly 9:15 a.m., I sent my first move. Subject line: Urgent financial irregularities. Review required. I addressed the email to Eric, CCNG no one. Attached was a sanitized summary of what I'd uncovered, limited to Clearwater Solutions, vague on the connections, but clear enough to raise alarms. If Eric was part of it, he'd panic. If he wasn't, he'd investigate. Either way, I'd see how deep the rot went. By 9:43 a.m., my phone buzzed. Eric. I let it go to voicemail. His message was sharp, clipped. Lena, I need you to call me back immediately. We need to talk about this email. I didn't. At 10:27, another email came in, this time from Natalie, HR. Ms. Moore, your recent communication to internal staff appears to violate the terms of your exit agreement. We ask that you cease all contact with Stratus Point employees immediately. Any further messages may result in legal escalation. Nice try. But I hadn't signed anything. No severance. No NDA. No agreement. They were bluffing. At noon, I drove to the bank and accessed my safety deposit box. Inside was another encrypted backup, this one older, but containing critical logs and the original authorization request signed by Rebecca Lane herself, requesting expanded access to the financial systems. Dated exactly 18 months ago, right when the Clearwater payments began. Back home, I noticed 3 missed calls. Eric. Natalie. And now Jordan Wells. That last one caught my attention. The consultant wasn't wasting time. That meant he was in deeper than I thought. Good. They were scrambling. I had their attention. And I hadn't even touched the real files yet. By 3 p.m., my home phone rang. No one had used that number for work in years. I let it ring once, twice, then picked up without speaking. Lena? This is Rebecca Lane. Her voice was calm, too calm. Like a pot just before it boils. We need to talk. I believe there's been a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? I asked, voice steady. Yes, she said quickly. These vendor payments, Clearwater Solutions, they're legitimate. The timing might look unusual, but there's nothing unethical going on. I stayed silent. She continued, look, transitions are messy. If you had questions, there were internal channels you could have used, like the board. I interrupted, you mean the same board that will be reviewing quarterly bonuses tomorrow morning? Silence. Then, a measured breath. Let's not escalate this, Lena. Why don't we meet privately? Just you and me. We can clear the air, maybe even negotiate a more generous severance. I'm busy tomorrow, I replied flatly. Besides, I think the board would be quite interested in Clearwater Solutions. And your brother-in-law. The pause on the line stretched like wire. You're making a serious mistake, she finally said, her tone hardening. Let's not be rash. You've always been smart. Let's work something out. I am working something out, I said. Goodbye, Rebecca. I hung up. 10 minutes later, another email from Natalie landed in my inbox. The subject line read, Updated severance package, confidentiality required. The document offered double my initial severance amount, attached to a long confidentiality clause. No mention of Clearwater, of course. No mention of what I'd uncovered. They were scrambling now. That much was clear. But they still thought they were dealing with a disgruntled employee looking for a bigger check. They had no idea this wasn't about revenge. It was about precision. And I had just started. That night, while the house was quiet and Marcus slept upstairs, I sat cross-legged on the living room floor, laptop open, a blanket draped around my shoulders. I wasn't tired. I was hunting. I dove into years of archived emails, payment logs, access reports, strings of data most people would find boring, impossible to read. But to me, they told a story. And as I followed the thread backward, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. Clearwater Solutions wasn't Rebecca Lane's first scheme. 3 years earlier, just months after she was promoted to CFO, Stratus Point had begun issuing consulting fees to another firm, Harborline Consulting. On paper, the services looked legitimate: process optimization, software audits, compliance reviews. But the invoices were vague. The payments were large. And the company? Registered to Melanie Lane, Rebecca's wife. No employees. No website. A virtual office address in Georgia. I kept digging. Procurement logs showed that Harborline had never gone through formal vendor approval. It had been fast-tracked. Authorized by Eric, the same guy who claimed to be blindsided by the Clearwater issue. And Jordan Wells? His firm had been hired through an executive discretionary contract, no review, no bidding process. A loophole designed for emergencies, now being used to bring in a consultant who, it turned out, wasn't just restructuring IT. He was quietly rewriting system access permissions behind my back. He wasn't brought in to improve our infrastructure. He was brought in to remove me. The elegant simplicity of it all made me pause. They weren't stealing millions in one go. No, it was smarter than that. Incremental theft, masked as legitimate transactions, routed through real services with inflated prices and recycled invoices. Enough to fly under the radar of internal audits. But I wasn't an auditor. I was a builder. And I remembered everything I'd ever constructed and every access point they forgot to shut down. I compiled it all: vendor connections, family ties, email approvals, timestamps, authorization trails. Nearly $4.3 million diverted over 3 years. Then I printed a short summary and loaded the full report onto a flash drive. The next morning, I sent a text to Henry Kim, a board member I'd once worked with during a security overhaul project. He picked up on the second ring. "Lena Moore," he said. "Heard you left Stratus Point." "Not exactly by choice," I replied. "Henry, I need 15 minutes of your time. In person." He paused. This about why the CFO looked like she'd swallowed a lemon during yesterday's board meeting? Probably. He chuckled quietly. "I always said you saw everything. Where do you want to meet?" An hour later, Henry and I sat at a quiet picnic table in a park 3 miles from Stratus Point's headquarters. No briefcases, no notepads. Just 2 former colleagues and a manila envelope between us. Inside was a printed summary of my findings and a flash drive holding the full digital trail: transactions, vendor registrations, internal emails, system logs. Everything. I slid it across the table. "That's all of it," I said calmly. "Dates, amounts, names, links. I'm not asking for my job back. I'm not seeking a payout. I just want the truth to land where it needs to." Henry didn't open the envelope right away. He just looked at me. "Why bring this to me?" "Because you ask questions," I said. "You're the only board member who ever actually read the audit reports instead of skimming the summaries." He nodded slowly, jaw tight. "There's an emergency finance committee session tomorrow morning," he said. "I'll make sure this is on the agenda." I didn't thank him. And he didn't ask me to stay in touch. As I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. Someone named Jordan Wells stopped by the house. Said it was urgent. I told him you were out. I stared at the screen for a long second. They were getting desperate. Good. That afternoon, I received 2 job offers, both from companies I had previously declined out of loyalty to Stratus Point. Both offers were for roles well above what I had been doing. Both included signing bonuses that would have thrilled me last week. I ignored them. For now, this wasn't about bouncing back. It was about seeing this through. That night, while the city slept, I logged into the company's email server using a credential I had built for internal redundancy tests. It should have been deactivated, another oversight in their sloppy transition. I scheduled a message. Subject line: "Before you approve bonuses, please read this." Attached, my entire report. Set to deliver to every board member at 8 a.m. sharp. Then I closed the laptop, drew the curtains, and went to sleep with the quiet satisfaction of a woman who hadn't just burned a bridge, she wired it to explode. Friday morning arrived bright and cool. I sat on the front porch with a steaming cup of tea, watching as the neighborhood slowly came to life, dog walkers, school buses, joggers pacing out their routines. The world moved on, unaware of the storm about to hit Stratus Point's executive floor. At exactly 8 a.m., the email I'd scheduled was delivered. Subject line: before you approve bonuses, please read this. Attached, the full report. By 8:17, my phone lit up with a string of unknown numbers. Assistants and board office lines scrambling to find me. I didn't answer. At 9 o'clock sharp, the Emergency Finance Committee meeting began. I knew Henry Kim would be there. He'd reviewed the files. He'd be watching reactions. At 9:32, I got a text from Maya, a junior systems analyst I'd mentored over the last year. Lena, security just walked Rebecca and Eric into separate rooms. Jordan looks pale as a ghost. What did you do? I smiled faintly, setting the phone face down on the table. The wheels were in motion now, too late for anyone to stop. At 10:04, my personal cell rang. This time, I picked up. Ms. Moore, the voice said, crisp and cautious. This is Danielle Graves, General Counsel for Stratus Point. We need you to come in immediately to discuss the information you've provided. I'm available by phone, I replied flatly. This requires a face-to-face meeting. No, it doesn't, I said calmly. Everything I know is in that report. And every piece of evidence is already backed up in multiple secure locations. There was a pause. If anything happens to me or my family, those backups go to the SEC, the IRS, and 3 investigative journalists. Silence. A long one. Ms. Moore, she finally said, her tone more careful, the board is taking this extremely seriously. Executives have already been placed on administrative leave. They would appreciate your cooperation. I've already cooperated fully. My part is done. I ended the call and left the house for the first time that day, driving 30 miles to a small diner outside the city. I needed distance and pancakes. Over lunch, local business alerts started pinging my inbox. Stratus Point executives under investigation for financial irregularities. No names yet, but that would come. By mid-afternoon, my phone buzzed again. Henry Kim. I stepped outside the diner to take the call. It's a bloodbath, he said without preamble. Rebecca cracked. Confessed to everything once she saw your report. She's trying to cut a deal, blaming Eric for helping her fast-track the payments. And Eric? Denying everything, naturally, Henry said with a sigh. But the timestamps and email chains speak for themselves. And Jordan? He's claiming ignorance. Says he was just a consultant and had no access to financial operations. The board's not buying it. All 3 are suspended pending full investigation. We've brought in forensic accountants. Early estimates put the embezzlement at around $4.5 million, maybe more. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the cool breeze settle over me. I had suspected as much. The board wants to speak with you, Henry continued. Not just to thank you. They want you back. I blinked. Back? They're creating a new position, Chief Information Security Officer. Executive level. Direct line to the board. No reporting through operations. Total independence. I hadn't expected that, not really. I'd imagined closure, maybe quiet satisfaction. But not this. I'll consider it, I said carefully. That evening, back home, I told Marcus everything. From the altered permissions to the backups. From the fabricated vendors to the final email blast. He listened without interrupting, nodding slowly. Then he asked the only question that mattered. What do you want to do now? And I didn't have an immediate answer. The revenge was complete. The ones who underestimated me were facing public disgrace and likely criminal charges. Justice had been served, cold and clean. But going back? That meant walking into the same building where they'd once discarded me like obsolete hardware. Even if the faces changed and the title was higher. Would it ever feel like home again? I need time, I said finally. Just a little. Later that night, I opened my otherwise dormant LinkedIn profile and posted a single line, Don't burn bridges. Let them collapse under the weight of their own corruption. Within minutes, my inbox lit up. Former colleagues, journalists, recruiters. The quiet analysts they'd fired had just pulled off a digital surgical strike and left a trail no one could ignore. Monday morning, I walked through the front doors of Stratus Point Technologies for the first time since they let me go. I wore a navy suit I hadn't needed in years. Simple, unassuming, but it fit perfectly. The lobby had that same sterile scent, glass cleaner, carpet glue, stale coffee. But something was different. The security guard, Chris, blinked when he saw me. Then he stood a little straighter. "Ms. Moore," he said, already printing a visitor badge. "Welcome back." His tone carried something I'd never heard from him before. Respect. The elevator to the executive floor was empty. I'd never ridden it alone. I'd never had a reason to visit the top level. Until now. In the boardroom, 10 directors sat around a long mahogany table. They all turned as I entered. Henry Kim gave a slight nod. The interim CEO, a woman I'd seen around but never spoken to directly, stood up nervously as I approached. "Ms. Moore," she began. "Thank you for coming. The situation you've brought to light is unprecedented." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The stack of documentation I had given them had already said everything. The forensic team has confirmed the scope of the fraud exceeds our initial estimate. Over $5.2 million diverted. Criminal charges are being prepared. She glanced down at the folder I placed on the table. Inside, I said, "You'll find my terms." She opened it. Her eyebrows lifted slightly as she read. Full audit authority across all departments. Independent security budget. Veto power on financial tech decisions. I nodded. "This is unusual," she said. "So was 3 years of unchecked embezzlement," I replied calmly. "That happened because no one was watching." "I will be." Silence. You could feel the shift in the room, the unspoken agreement that what happened once would never happen again. "You have until noon," I added, standing. "I have other offers." As I reached the door, Henry called out, "Lena, did you plan this all along?" I paused. "I didn't plan to be fired after 18 years, I said. Everything after that was just me doing what I've always done, identifying system vulnerabilities and patching them. At 11:47 a.m., my phone rang. They had accepted every condition. 6 months later, I sat in my new corner office, sunlight spilling over polished floors and dual monitors glowing with system dashboards. The view stretched over the Charlotte skyline, familiar buildings, now seen from an unfamiliar height. The nameplate outside my door read, Lena Moore, Chief Information Security Officer. It still felt strange sometimes. But the authority wasn't what mattered. What mattered was that someone was finally watching the watchers. Rebecca Lane had pleaded guilty. Her cooperation had earned her a reduced sentence, but it was still substantial. Eric was indicted shortly after. His defense unraveled under the weight of system logs and approval chains he thought no one had preserved. Jordan Wells had fled the country, Brazil, last I heard, but extradition was already in progress. The money? Most of it had been recovered, enough to stabilize the company and protect the employees who had nothing to do with the scheme. Maya, the junior analyst I once mentored, now led our threat detection team. I'd promoted her myself. She reminded me of myself at that age, sharp, quiet, overlooked. I made sure she wasn't anymore. A soft knock on the door pulled me from my screen. Marcus leaned in with a familiar smile. "You ready for lunch?" I nodded and grabbed my coat. As we walked through the office, conversations quieted not from fear, but out of respect. People knew. Not the boardroom drama or dollar amounts. But the story. The woman they fired had saved the company without ever raising her voice. In the elevator, Marcus gently squeezed my hand. "Are you happy?" I thought for a moment. The fire that had fueled me in those first days, the cold, righteous fury, had long since burned out. What remained wasn't joy. It wasn't even triumph. It was peace. "I'm good," I said quietly. Outside, the October sun was soft on our faces. We walked down the street toward a little cafe we used to visit years ago. My phone buzzed. A message from Henry, Board approved your full security budget. Unanimous vote. I smiled. Marcus noticed. Good news. I slid the phone back into my pocket. Just thinking about bridges, I said. Some collapse under the weight of greed, but others, when rebuilt the right way, become stronger than they ever were before. This time, I had built it right.